In this video, I'm going to talk about the Unit 2 packet, which is matter and change, and we are going to be on page 6. On page 6, we're going to look at physical properties, chemical properties, intensive and extensive properties, and start classifying these things. So remember, a physical property you can observe with the senses, and it could be determined without destroying the object. You are not making any fundamental change to the object. So examples would be color, shape, mass, length, odor. All those are examples of physical properties. Right? You can either look at them and observe them, or you can use some type of equipment to measure them. Like mass, you could use a balance. Length, you could use a ruler, and so on. Chemical property is a little different, though. It's talking about how a substance reacts with something else. The original substance is fundamentally changed in observing a chemical property. So, for example, if you want to see if a certain metal will rust, well, if it goes through that reaction, you now have something different, right? So it says the iron has reacted with oxygen and the original iron metal has changed. So in that case, the reaction is iron reacting with oxygen, and you get iron oxide, which is Fe2O3. So you made these new bonds here. All right, so that is an example of a chemical reaction, and the reason why you observed that was because it was a chemical property. Intensive properties are independent of amount, so alcohol is flammable. Remember, I talked about that the other day. Do not overthink these. Don't think about it in terms of the size of the fire. It's just, is alcohol able to burn? If you have a small amount of alcohol, it will burn. If you have a large amount of alcohol, it will still burn. You did not get a different answer. The answer is yes, it was flammable. Extensive properties do depend on the amount. So example, the mass of the alcohol. Well, if you change the amount of alcohol, you are now going to get a different result for the mass. All right, so if you end up getting a different result because of a different amount, that means it was extensive. So I'm just going to go over a couple of these, and then you'll be able to work on them. So what we want to do is classify them as either physical or chemical, and then either intensive or extensive. So weight, that would be a physical change. You can get the weight of something very easily without changing the substance. Now, the next question is it intensive or extensive? Well, if you're talking about weight and you change the amount of whatever it is you're weighing, you are going to get a different result. So I would say that is extensive then. Blue color, you could just observe that with your senses. Just look at it and see that it's blue. Is it still going to be blue if you have a different amount of it? So imagine you have a blue piece of paper and you just rip a little piece off of it. Is it still blue? In that case, the answer is yes. So changing the amount did not change your result. So that means it is intensive. Density throws people off. Density is always mass divided by volume. You can just measure density. Right, you measure the mass, you measure the volume, you do that division, you have your density. Now, density is actually an intensive property. It doesn't depend on how much you have. Aluminum's density is, I think, 2.70 grams per milliliter. Whether you have a small piece of aluminum or a very large piece of aluminum, it's still 2.70 grams per milliliter. And the reason for that is if you make any change in volume, the mass is going to change at that same ratio. Right, it's always a consistent ratio there. Flammability, last one I'll do with you, physical or chemical. So if you change or if you check to see if something's flammable, like I take this packet and I try and burn it. Well, if it is flammable, it is going to go through a chemical reaction. I'm not going to have this packet how I normally have it. I'm going to have ash left over. It's going to generate some heat, some light. It's going to generate some smoke. Right, it went through a change there. All right, now, is this packet flammable whether I rip off one page or I burn the whole packet? Yeah, it will still burn. Remember, you'll get a different size fire, but that's not what I'm asking with flammability. It's just, is it able to burn? So you should be able to go through the rest of this packet, or this page, page 6. The one thing I wanted to point out down at the bottom, luster. Luster is how shiny something is. Right, so if something's real shiny, it's said to be lustrous or have luster or have a high luster. If it's dull, then it does not have luster. By the time you get to the end, If you did it all right, you should see that there is a combination that you will never be able to get. All right, so pay attention to that. If you did it all right, you should be able to answer that question at the end.